Illinois law impacting what transactions financial institutions can tack on a fee on could send ripples across the country for everyday consumers and small businesses. What's happening here? Well, in 2024, Illinois' state budget included a first in the nation Interchange Fee Prohibition Act. Simply put, it prohibits financial institutions from charging a fee when someone uses a credit or debit card on taxes and tips, but just in Illinois. Now, the fee can be added to the goods or services, but not to the taxes and tips. Financial institutions ended up going to court, and the state approved an extension this year for when the measure is to kick in. Now, barring any judicial regulatory intervention, the Illinois Act, it'll take effect July 1st in 2027. Now, with more on what some say is one state possibly upending the national payment system, we're joined by Steve Swedberg, policy analyst with the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Steve, thanks for taking time with us here on The States. You looked deep into this issue and the potential impacts that it could have on consumers and small businesses alike with the report, The Hidden Costs of Interchange Fee Bans. What did you find?
Well, we found a few things. Number one, this is often passed as a consumer protection provision. What happens in reality, and what I ended up doing was looking at previous history, particularly with the Durbin Amendment, when they put a cap on interchange fees. What happened as a result of that was that, well, for one, the consumers really didn't get any of those savings that proponents thought were going to happen. And another issue is they experienced a higher cost elsewhere with their financial services, whether or not they lost free checking, whether or not they paid additional fees elsewhere, or they had fewer rewards. And that's just on the consumer side, never mind what happened with financial institutions or even smaller merchants.
Yeah, your report delving into other analysis, looking at Senator Dick Durbin's amendments for a cap on fees, and you found $6.5 billion in reduction in annual bank revenues. Now, that means, the banks are going to have to find a way to make up that revenue. Banks reducing the availability of free checking accounts. And free checking accounts having fallen 60% before being implemented and 20% afterwards, with nearly doubling monthly fees as well as a result. This trickles down to the consumer.
Oh, no, absolutely. And people, oftentimes when people pass policy, they think of it like it's a machine, like you adjust one little gear or screw and it's fine. But in reality, it's more like an ecosystem. When you do pass a regulation like this, there's ripple effects that happen with multiple actors in multiple ways that are unintended or unanticipated. And that's really what this paper gets at. It's what is the status quo versus the alternative. And we have seen the alternative with the Durbin Amendment and what happens with debit card interchange fees.
And again, what we're talking about is not the Durbin Amendment. We're talking about an Illinois state policy dealing with similar types of fees, but specifically fees that may now, according to Illinois law, starting July 1st of 2027, can't be added to the transactions involving taxes and tips. What's the possibility that if this law survives court challenges, it could possibly spread across the country?
I mean, I would say it's pretty decent because number one, you're seeing copycat bills. There was recently one in Colorado. Fortunately, Governor Polis did veto it because he was concerned about a litigation and that the cost would be too high and that the benefit would be too low. You're seeing a few other states like Delaware toying, and like New York and New Jersey toying with the possibility of it. And when you have one state pass it, it's tricky because the payment network, that infrastructure is national. So if you have it in one state, then it makes it more complicated to process payments and to do the fraud protection and the dispute resolution that the interchange fees fund, and it makes it more difficult to maintain that system if you have this as a result, because it's not as simple as a software update. You're talking about multiple parties within a complex system across borders that would all need to be implemented and do the transaction costs, which would be much higher than a simple software update.
Now, of course, in Colorado, if that did become the policy similar to what Illinois is, you broke down some of the financial impact, some of the economic impact that could be fallout from such a policy going into effect. Talk a little bit about some of those numbers.
I mean, in terms of like I'd have to pull up the specific numbers, but
sure.
There were some concerns that it would. There was some modeling from the Common Sense Institute. They were looking more at the consumer impact. And again, what's tricky about trying to get like an actual estimate. I was trying to use previous interchange fee bands to get a proxy, but this is really a first of its kind of law. And the reason why this one would be more complex versus the Durbin Amendment is because the transaction, when you put a transaction through on the credit card, it comes with the total. The system's really not capable of being able to provide the breakdown. So if you require that in one state, now you have a fragmented payment system, and that makes the compliance more complicated. And that's also true for smaller merchants, because if there's a partial refund or a full refund, and then you have to do that dispute resolution, that makes it more complicated for smaller merchants, which, in spite of what like retail associations are saying, it's to me the smaller merchants that can't handle those compliance and auditing costs, whereas the larger ones can, which is why the Electronic Payments Coalition found that the largest benefit companies that are at benefit are going to be like Walmart, Amazon, and Home Depot. It's not going to be the little guy, even for the merchants.
And interesting, I followed the Illinois story closely back in 2024 when it was implemented. It was part of a budget negotiation where the retailers who have to pay taxes they collect, right? They act as the middleman. They collect the taxes and they submit those taxes to the government, the state. I'm sure this happens all across the country, but they get charged a portion of that to essentially do that. So there was an agreement between the retailers and the governor's office to reduce the burden on the retailers collecting that tax in exchange for having this interchange fee prohibition. What does that say about how these types of deals are coming together with different interests involved?
Well, in that specific scenario, it's less about consumer protection, even though that's what the proponents purported it to be. But as you discussed, the back deal room had to do with a negotiation between the state and the retailers, and it came out a political compromise.
Yeah, and to the possibility of this spreading elsewhere, of course, that depends on what happens in the courts. But as you researched, you found that CSI did put some numbers, just estimates on what would happen if, say, Colorado adopted this policy. And you can kind of translate this to other states as well, but they said it would reduce Colorado's GDP by about $1.3 billion by the fifth year of such a policy being put into place. And they also estimate that it would cut annual personal income by $1.1 billion and eliminate roughly 8,800 jobs. Plus, you've got merchants that could possibly save around $110.5 million annually. This is all going to impact the economic outcomes.
Absolutely. You're gonna the smaller banks and credit unions are gonna have a harder time with compliance. The merchants are gonna have more compliance and auditing costs. And consumers everywhere are going to pay. And the more states that do this and create a bigger patchwork system as a result, the larger those effects will be. And it won't affect just the states that pass it. It'll eventually, the most likely outcome is that will eventually affect all 50 states.
And where do you see this going? It's still kind of in the courts, and Illinois delaying implementation until possibly seeing some kind of resolution in the courts. How integral is that decision by the courts on this and giving it some finality?
Oh, for sure. Like the OCC, when they made their ruling, that was kind of gave Colorado a second thought to the point of vetoing it. They thought it wasn't worthwhile implementing it. And with regards to Illinois, this is actually the second time they've delayed the law, implementing the law. And I think other states are kind of questioning whether they should implement it, and just giving pause to it, just given how it does affect the national payment network system.
Steve Swedberg, policy analyst with the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Be sure to seek out his report about what the impacts of such a measure could mean for other states all across the country.